So here's what we're probably going to put in. We've got the Sony XAV AX1000. It has Sirius XM already added to it. Let's see. Sirius XM Connect Vehicle Tuner. A Scosche HA10B harness. Some nice quick screw-on connectors. We've got the antenna adapter. That'll be handy. And we've got the Navinio backup camera. And that's the one that's made specifically for the Honda CR-V. You basically pull the license plate cover off and you put that in its place. Box of T-taps. We'll be using those to tap into our backup light circuit. And the trim kit from Scosche, which is the HA1559B model. All right, let's unpack this baby. There's the factory harness. Sirius antenna adapter. Since I didn't want to do any soldering, I bought the screw-on connectors. Those are real nice. You just break that connection there, you slip it over the twisted pairs, and then you tighten it down and it locks that thing on permanently, and it's waterproof and it's awesome. So I'm using the manual as a reference, and I'm just working my way from top to the bottom, and I'm just doing each one at a time, just stripping it back and just working my way through. Okay, we sped it forward a little bit, and we have all of them done. There's a few wires at the end that are some extras, but that's to be expected since it's a universal harness. And that's the extra. What I have there is I have a blue antenna wire and I have a purple backup wire, and I have a green parking brake wire that I will ground to a ground screw. And the extra wires, since we don't really need them, I'm just going to zip tie them just to keep them out of our way. All right, there's the small trim going in the big trim piece. Just put on the two side pieces. They click right onto there and they screw on there. The enclosed screws. And it's pretty simple install. It's 4 screws on each side, so a total of 8. There's 2 plastic screws that are the pointy ones. They go into the plastic on the plastic. And then there's 2 of the metal screws, and those are the ones I'm putting in now. We're trying to. They didn't fit in those holes. Just have to find a couple holes. So now we're going to go over to the plastic screws. Those ones are easy to figure out. Oh, still don't fit. It's got to be a place here somewhere. Oh, wait a minute, that might be. Oh, found them. All right, ready to go. I ended up taking the blue wire, the right there, blue with white striped, and that one even says to the power antenna aerial lead or the power supply lead of the antenna. So that one is the blue wire that comes off of that harness, and you just attach it to that blue and white wire that comes out of the harness, the main harness, and that'll power your aerial antenna, give you good FM and AM reception. All right, so in the car now, we just need to pop off that first piece of trim. And that little piece came off with it. You can just put a pry tool in there, and that usually will come off pretty easy. Mine was a little bit finicky. Just wouldn't come apart. Pop off that second end piece. And to get that big cover off, you just got to pop these 2 little caps. And then just take the 2 10mm bolts out. Take a pry tool, find a spot where you can get in there and just start working your way around the perimeter. Just take your time and the whole thing just pops off. So there's the license plate light from the inside. You just need to push those two tabs and pull that light out. And once that piece comes out, so once the light bulb is out, then you just have those two little tabs right there that you can just push together, squeeze them together, and that whole assembly pops out. It's a little bit tight. All right, I finally got it out. Now what I'm doing is I'm taking a razor blade and just scraping off the old gasket so that I can reuse it onto the new backup light. So I'm just taking care. I can check it, fit it real quick. Yeah, there's like 4 little tabs on that thing that I want to get rid of. And what I ended up doing was then taking that and just spraying it with some spray adhesive. And then when it went on there, it fit. So now it's got the adhesive on it. And basically just run those wires through the hole with your backup camera. And just fit it in there, and you push down and it'll snap into place. Adding that gasket made it a little harder. I had to push a little bit harder to kind of compress that down, because I think it's designed for those tabs to fit on the sheet metal and snap into place without a gasket. But by putting it on there, and then you just feed the light bulb back into place, it snaps right in there, and there's the cable coming out for the camera, and it's pretty solid. It's not a bad fit. Right there, that was a little bit loose. I had to keep messing with that, and eventually I got that to just snap into place. There was something binding a little bit, but it went in. All right, so there's the Sirius antenna. It has a magnet on the bottom. It comes with a little alcohol pad, and what I did was I just went right there and I cleaned the surface of the paint real good, and now that just snaps right down on there with the magnet. And I saw how to install this from the Crutchfield website, and they suggested that you just take it right there and just run that wire straight in. But so what I did was I pulled the weather strip off right there. That's also going to allow me to be able to pull that headliner down a little bit, so I can run my connector from the backup camera through that boot there and inside. Now I just could feed that wire I could just tuck it into there. So for that, pop that little boot off, and then I just went and got a piece of copper wire, and you just fish that through that boot. Once you get it to come through, that's the end of the wire for the backup camera. And I'm just going to tape it onto the copper wire so I can pull it back through that really tiny little boot. Spraying just a little bit of silicone, using a rag to block it, and then just kind of take your time and just work it through there. And it takes a while, but eventually you will get it. It's just a little bit of a pain because that RCA connector is kind of large. It's a pretty big diameter. It's probably almost like 3/8 of an inch. You can see it takes a while to get that thing through there. So now I'm going to feed the wire up through that little channel in the side of the hatch so that I can pull the main wire and the power wire and the rest of that that signal cable, pull all that through. So once that's through, you plug them together, and then I'm just putting a little bit of electrical tape on them just so they never come loose. You don't have to do that, but I just didn't want that to be a problem. So I've got all that hooked up now. So I've got the wire fed through. So now, coming out of the signal wire, the one with the yellow, there's a little red pigtail on both ends. And that little red pigtail, you have to get power to it on this end. So I'm going to go ahead and just split the power wire, the red and black wire, and then I'm just going to put a T-tap on the power wire. So I'm just trying to separate those two. Okay, there's the T-tap going on, just you crimp it, and then you just strip back that wire and just crimp on the connector. And once that's on, just plug that into the T-tap part and makes the little T. And then now power so just plug it in. All right. I'm just taping, making a little harness, just kind of keeping it clean. You can spend as much or as little time as you want with that harness. All right, so now we're back to the Sirius XM wire. And what I'm doing is I'm just drilling, making a little notch, a little bit larger than the diameter of that wire in that channel. And then I'm just going to file the edges to make it more like a little perfect U instead of a hole through it. And then you just feed the wire through that little slot, and you can, when you're done, you can just snap the rubber gasket right back over it. So once I've got both of those wires fed underneath the headliner and through that gasket, now I'm going to go ahead and have to run them to the front of the car. So I've picked this little channel right here, and so I have the two wires. I have the backup camera feed, and I have the Sirius XM antenna. And just sit there and just work them all the way down. And then you're going to go around the inside of both the car door trim. Got a ton of cable that you always have to mess around with. So you make that little turn, and then just get up under the weather strip in there, and just kind of with finger, with the little pry tool if you need it, and you just kind of just carefully work them both, and they both go under there perfectly, and you can't even see them, and nothing gets crimped. You just have to take your time and work your way down. So pull the door window molding off, and if you can, take that piece of trim off. I tried and I couldn't get it off, and there's like an airbag underneath there, so I didn't want to keep messing with it too much. So I ended up just running those two wires. I could feed them in there enough, and at the bottom there's like a little small hole right where my finger is right there that goes right into the dash. So I was able to feed those wires, those two wires, and there's going to be a third wire, which is going to be the microphone, and that's going to be installed up above the rear view mirror. So there's the microphone. It's got a little clip on it, and that clip just goes right up inside there, and it clips up on the headliner. And then you just feed those wires through the headliner back to that A pillar and go through the same spot as those other two wires. So you just clip it on out there somewhere where you can get to it, and then just once it's in place, so you pull it back, there you go, it locks on, and then you just slip it over dead center. And then that's like adjustable. And then just route all that, tuck all that up inside there. And when you're done, that's all hidden. It takes a little bit of time to get it in there. And then you route that through that little crack there, through that seam, if you can't get that piece of trim off, which I couldn't. So now we got to take the dash apart. So there's like a little hole right there. You just put your pry bars in there. And just lift up, and that little piece pries up in the front. And once it pops up, you can grab it and you can pull back on it, and then it'll come out. Just kind of pull it towards you a little bit, and it pops up. And then this piece down here, just have to find a little spot where you can get a pry bar in there. And then just carefully work your way around and release all the clips. Those pry bars come in handy. I got them off of Amazon for, I don't know, 15 bucks for a whole set of all kinds of them. Just pull that panel out of the way. And then now there's only one more panel at the top that you have to just grab and pull back, and that thing was tough. I really had a hard time getting that thing out. And you don't disconnect that, you just sort of lift it up and pull it out of the way, because I guess it has the airbags warning sensor thing is on that, so just pull that out of the way. And then it just for Phillips head, or they also have their 8mm sockets, which I didn't have a 8mm socket, so I just used a Phillips head, and they came out no problem. and then you just have to, I mean, that thing's been in for 10 years, so you have to kind of just keep messing with it until you can figure out where it's snapped in, and eventually it comes free, but it's a little tricky. There we go. So there we go. And it's just that antenna cable and that main harness cable. That one, that green, is just the. It actually goes back into itself. It's just the aux, the little the aux input jack, which you'll never need again. That one, because you get the that comes with the new radio, so don't need to worry about that. But just have to find the little push button on the back of the connector, and once you do that, it'll break free. So you just pop it, so eventually those come loose. So I got to still get those cables routed into the dash. Still messing with that A pillar, because at the top it's not a clip, it's like a slot, and it's just, I don't know, I just couldn't get it. I tried, I was thinking maybe I'll bust it loose at the bottom, but I gave up, and I just ended up routing the wires, like I said, through those little teeny hole, went under the dash, just fished them through, and just pulled them through the hole where the radio's going. So here's the new radio. There's the parking brake wire. There's Sirius. So there's that other red pigtail for the camera, and I'm just tying that into the purple backup wire. And then there's a grounding screw right there I found that I'm just going to put the park and brake, that wire onto. And then you just plug in, there's the backup camera going in. There's the microphone plug that goes into a little red hole that says mic. And then the last one is the XM antenna wire. And that just has a little plug there, just snaps into place. And there's two left. There's the main harness and the antenna harness, the one with the blue and the black. So those two just snap together, and that's everything. Just feed it all in. Snap it into place. It's a pretty good fit. It actually went in pretty clean. And there's 4 screws you put back in. I'm just showing you how to put one in. But just do that 4 times. So back to the Sirius cable. I'm just putting a little bit of electrical tape around the wire right where I'm going to put into that little slot, just for some extra protection, because I drilled out that little channel. So once you just slip it down in there, you can just fiddle with that molding, and all that goes right back on real nice. And then you just slip, once it's on there, you got to make sure you're kind of cover the headliner with part of the molding. That helps to hold the headliner into place. It's a little tricky around where that wire is, because it's a little bit of an issue. But if you're careful, you can. There's the headliner still. So once you get all that in there, I had to pull that light fixture out to be able to drop the headliner down a little bit. That's just 2 screws and a little plastic cover that thing just pulls off easily. And that just fell out. I think that's for like a baby seat or something. So once you get it all cleaned up there, you can finish that trim. Still, you can still see the power wires there that we have to figure out what to do with. So I'm heating up a sharp utensil, and what I'm going to do is poke a hole through that rubber boot. And it's almost, with that tool, it almost makes it like self-sealing. If you kind of poke it through and then take the other ends of the power wires and just kind of, as you're pulling the poker out, just sort of slip the wires through. So now that the power wire is through, I can just pull that tight, pull that through. And then you can push the connectors, the both ends of that that rubber boot right there. Just put those into place. It's a little tricky getting that boot in. You have to I had to use one of those nice little plastic tools, kind of press it in, and there it goes. So now you have to feed the wires into that light area. So there's 2 little covers. Pop it off with there's a little slot. You can see better down here. Just there's a little hole there. Just reach in there and just sort of pop that little cover off. And now there's 2 screws right there. Nope. Thought maybe it was like a 10 millimeter, but no, it's just I think it's another 8 millimeter. Like I said, I don't have that, so I had to use the dreaded Phillips. but if you push hard enough, you won't strip it. You can see all the tools that are needed. And there's like, I think 3 clips. So I ended up like putting another pry bar in there. Once again, just work around until you find where one pops loose. And once one came out, they all come out, because it's actually easier than the trim probably once you get that thing to pop off that first clip. Just gotta keep going around till you find a spot that is loose. So once it goes, so just the whole thing just pops off. Now the very bottom of that thing, that the white one, is the backup light. That one right there. So it's going to be the very bottom light, and there's a green wire and a black wire. And the green one is power, and the black is ground. And I'm going to put 2 of those T-taps on, so that when you put the car in reverse, it's going to send power not only to the camera, but it's also going to send power to the radio through that red pigtail wire, and it's going to tell the radio to turn the screen onto the backup camera. So you just put those on, just squeeze them until they snap. Gotta make sure the wire's in there straight. Once those things click, they're on there pretty good. And since the wires were too short, I had to use 2 pieces of wire. You can see there. I only had black, so it was not a big deal. I just made sure I kept track of which one was the hot and which one was the negative. And once that's in there, just pop that light back on. Put the screws back in. Put those covers back on. And right there, and what I'm doing is I'm just going to tape. I'm just making like a little harness. And it just runs right under. There's like a little hole right there underneath that plastic piece, and it's perfect. It goes right in there. So once you get that thing, and as the lid closes, it doesn't affect any of that, because there's a good 1/4 inch, 3/8 gap in that lid. And I just use some zip ties. Right, just go through, and everywhere that the harness is kind of loose, I just kind of attach it. And then just go back through and put everything back on in reverse. Big panel. Just find the holes where the where it fits together, and hit it with your hand and it just pops right into place. Put the two 10mm bolts back in. Snap the two covers in. Put the two side pieces back on. Try to figure out which side they go on first. Just give it a light hit. It's pretty easy. Put the main cover on. There's 4 connectors on that. Just going to finish up that harness. So there's the backup camera. And the light, it blocks a little bit of light, but it's not a big deal. There's the antenna, and you can see there's plenty of space. It never gets close to crimping that cable. And there we have it. Got all kinds of cool stuff. Phone and tuner with like 18 FM and like 12 AM settings. Got the XM. It's just a preview. I still have to. It also came with 3 free months. Oh, and there's the backup camera. Put it in reverse. Instant camera. Might have to adjust those lines a little bit, but you can do that inside the stereo. And it's got a USB that you just can plug your phone into. And that's it. Enjoy.